Before we get to the buy low, guys, this week, I want to recap who we had last week as trade targets. Travis Etienne, okay, probably a little too late to buy him. We've been screaming to buy him all season now, and goes out there, crushes the Bills. Top 5 to 10 running back locked in. Aaron Jones, we talked about as well. I thought Aaron Jones was going to be back this week, and I will reiterate that if you can go out there, if you can buy Aaron Jones, that mid to low end RB2 in a full BBR format with the receiving upside, probably a good idea, especially going into the bye week. Nobody's thinking about Aaron Jones. Brian Robinson, I mean, the Washington Commanders offense completely tanked. Maybe it's not as appealing to go out there and buy Brian Robinson as that low end RB2. Still think that he has a safe workload. Austin Eckler will be a running back we talk about in just 1 second, obviously going through and trying to target Eckler where we can. Rachaad White, running back coming out of the bye week. Rachaad White in a full BBR format will have the receiving role. Ultimately, at the end of the day, not necessarily someone that we are super pumped about when it comes to the offense, but still has the workload, has the receiving role, and is really not seeing any competition. Jaylen Waddle, Chris Alve are 2 other players that we mentioned that we will talk about later in this video, so I don't want to talk about them too much. And then we also had Breece Hall as a buy low candidate for us last week. And with Breece Hall, I'm sorry, that's the one guy that you can no longer buy low on, okay? The window has shut. I'd say if we were looking at these names, the guys from last week that are now impossible to get will be Travis Etienne and Breece Hall. Hopefully you added them to your team. And yeah, now let's go through and let's see if we can identify some players this week. I'm going to be very brief with our first guy, Austin Eckler. We already talked about him last week, and I just want to reiterate. With Eckler, he's a top 3 running back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I understand in the majority of leagues, if your league mates know what they're doing, there's no way in hell you get Austin Eckler, right? I mean, so really, this is a long shot. This is for those casual formats. And with Austin Eckler, I mean, the reasons we didn't love him coming into the season were 1, his age, the tendency to fall off at that point of your career based off what we've historically seen with the data and what it means for injuries. And 2, the addition of Quentin Johnston and a healthy Mike Williams, a healthy Keenan Allen, potentially taking target volume away from Eckler, where last year you saw games that Mike Williams played, Austin Eckler went out there and he averaged 6.5 targets per game, whereas games that Mike Williams missed, he averaged over 10 targets per game. Well, Mike Williams is not playing through the rest of this season, ladies and gentlemen. So Eckler, locked and loaded, top 3 running back rest of year. Really excited to see him this week. Now, going over to our next guy. Devonta Smith is a wide receiver that I am surprised to see people panicking over because we just went through this. If y'all remember, go back to week 3. A.J. Brown was a screaming buy low candidate coming off a week where A.J. Brown only had 29 receiving yards, had 0 receiving touchdowns through the first 2 weeks. And what did we talk about back then when A.J. Brown was a buy low candidate? That you're going to be looking at the Philadelphia Eagles wide receivers and say, okay, well, you have 2 elite level wide receivers in the same offense. Obviously, both these guys can't eat every single week, and you're going to get ebbs and flows. 1 week, it's going to be an A.J. Brown week. The next week, it's going to be Devonta Smith week. And going through the first 2 weeks, everybody thought Smith was just taking over. People counting out A.J. Brown. We're like, no, you still want A.J. Brown as the wide receiver 1 in this offense. But ultimately, both guys can be viable. Well, now we've seen the exact opposite happen, right? Over the past 3 weeks now, with Devonta Smith, this past week, he only gave you 1.5 points gross. The week prior, he gave you 78 receiving yards. The week before that, he only gave you 28. So yeah, you're sitting with only 290 receiving yards so far in this season for Devonta Smith in comparison to A.J. Brown at 541. This is natural wide receiver volatility. Of course, you would still rather have A.J. Brown over Devonta Smith, as everybody already knows. But if you are looking at this, Smith should take a step forward, while A.J. Brown probably takes a small step backwards. And I think these wide receivers will be much closer together going through the rest of the season. You just have to understand it's not going to be consistent flatline production. He's not Keenan Allen. He's not going to see 10 targets a game. The targets are going to be down just a bit, but you're going to see those massive spikes and those dips, and it's all going to even out at the end of the day. Some of what we were talking about with George Kittle as a buy low candidate a few weeks back. Now, going over to a wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, I've had so many people in our live streams going, Mason, is Amon-Ra St. Brown going to miss the rest of the season? Mason, do I need to be panicking on Amon-Ra St. Brown? I watched a YouTube video on him, and I've talked about this time and time again, ladies and gentlemen, but go through and look at the incentives of someone who's making a YouTube video about an injury for an individual player. And trust me, I'm saying this as one of those idiots on YouTube, and you should not listen to me. You shouldn't listen to anybody on YouTube, okay? But nonetheless, the incentive is going, oh, okay, I can get a lot of clicks if I go through and say this guy's going to miss the rest of the year. Oh, hey, he has a sports hernia. We haven't heard anything about it, but sports hernia, he's going to be out for the rest of the season. Drop a like, subscribe. I'll update you tomorrow. And then he plays the next week. We saw the same thing with Cooper Kupp last week. I was having to deal with everybody screaming at us going, Mason, why are you ranking Cooper Kupp so high? I mean, I watched YouTube videos saying he's only 80%, and this is super concerning. Cooper Kupp's in jeopardy rest of the year. Don't overreact to fear-mongering on YouTube, to the people saying that your wide receiver is going to be out the rest of the season. Do not panic sell Amon-Ra St. Brown. We just got a report this morning saying Amon-Ra St. Brown's feeling pretty good and more probable than questionable to play this week. As a wide receiver one rest of season, Jameson Williams will expand his role in Detroit as well. Jameson Williams going to be the field stretching wide receiver in this Detroit Lions offense, where Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be the guy seeing targets. I mean, close to the line of scrimmage, and he's going to be the guy you want in that full PPR league. Now, going over to a running back that it's been very surprising to see how this played out in Houston. Damen Pierce is a running back that I liked in drafts this year. I mean, I was going through and said, oh, okay, well, the Texans added nobody at the running back position. The Texans got a quarterback upgrade with CJ Stroud. And yeah, Damen Pierce has had the workload, and CJ Stroud has been way better than I even expected him to be. But Damen Pierce has been horrendous. Damen Pierce so far this season is rolling up with 247 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and a whopping 2.9 yards per carry. Damen Pierce is giving you his best Ramondre Stevenson impression when it comes to his efficiency. But the difference is Ramondre Stevenson's stuck in the worst offense in the NFL when Damen Pierce has no excuse here. Well, I mean, I don't want to say he has no excuse. The excuse that you could make for Damen Pierce going up until this point has been the fact that the Houston Texans have had one of the most decimated offensive lines in the NFL. This past week, you got a lot of these pieces back in. Going forward, the Houston Texans should have a much healthier and a much more improved offensive line than what we saw earlier this season. And you're seeing this running back room in Houston transition from being a 3-man running back by committee to a 2-man running back by committee. So while Damen Pierce has been very bad, and while Damen Pierce, I mean, there were a lot of weeks we didn't even rank him as a top 24 RB. I think that based off back-to-back weeks here with 20 carries, 24 carries, in the improved offensive line play, Damen Pierce will now be a top 24 running back in our rankings going forward. Now, as we go over to some of our classic hits, let me pull up what we have with these guys. And as I do, let me remind you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the live chat. You can find that link in the description. Promo code FLOCK on Underdog is going to give you a 100% deposit match. You're going to get our updated rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be getting a Patrick Mahomes special pick'em more than less than half a total yard going up against the Broncos on Thursday night if you're new to Underdog. And it's my birthday the day that we're recording this, so Underdog's hooking everybody up because of it with a Justin Herbert special pick'em on Monday night, more than less than half a total yard going up against the Dallas Cowboys. That doesn't matter if you use code FLOCK 2 years ago, use code FLOCK last year, use code FLOCK today, yesterday, or tomorrow. Just make sure you do it. That way you get hooked up with 2 special pick'ems. Never happens, but Underdog's doing it for our birthday. And the other pick'em that I really like on Underdog right now is actually going to be Kyron Williams for more than 56.5 rushing yards. Now, going over to our next wide receiver with Chris Olave. I don't mind his Underdog pick'em at 59.5 receiving yards either, but this is a wide receiver that over the past 2 weeks has been bad. Very, very bad. And I was calling Chris Olave a buy low candidate last week in fantasy after he goes out there and he has 1 reception for 6 targets and 4 receiving yards. This week, he had 2 receptions for a whopping 12 receiving yards off of 5 targets. Back-to-back weeks where Olave is giving you absolutely nothing. He kind of saves his day with the receiving touchdown this past week, but obviously we know you can't really rely on touchdowns. Extremely volatile from a week-to-week perspective. But nonetheless, if we are trying to project this out with Chris Olave going forward, I am going to ignore what we've had over the past 2 weeks. Derek Carr suffers the shoulder injury, where you have Derek Carr just giving you absolutely nothing against Tampa. You get a whopping 13 receptions going to Alvin Kamara, where Derek Carr cannot push the ball down the field. In this New England Patriots game, it's not a football game. They win 34-0. Chris Olave tweaks his ankle before the game happens. Derek Carr is still dealing with a shoulder injury. So you don't really have a normal game environment. You don't really have any necessity to push the ball down the field to Chris Olave. So based off the Derek Carr shoulder injury, based off the Chris Olave ankle injury, and based off the fact they just win 34-0, I think judging Chris Olave over the past 2 weeks is probably something that you don't want to be doing. And instead, we want to take a step back and we want to look at what happened when Derek Carr was healthy, when Chris Olave was healthy. And through those first 3 weeks, Chris Olave, 10 targets, 112 receiving yards, 11 targets, 86 receiving yards, 11 targets, 104 receiving yards. Chris Olave through the first 3 weeks had double-digit targets every single game, had on average over 100 receiving yards per game. This is someone I'm excited about. This is someone that I want to be making that bet on. And yeah, I mean, if you're ranking him, I'm still putting him as a high-end wide receiver too. I mean, our wide receiver rankings will come out later today, so just make sure you're subscribed if you want to see those. And we put Chris Olave at wide receiver 16 in those rankings going up against Houston, even though he's only the wide receiver 35 this season from a points per game perspective. Now, I'm going to be very brief with Jonathan Taylor. I just have to put JT on this list. I didn't expect it because, I mean, hell, I thought we were all going to be adults about this and go, okay, yes, Jonathan Taylor played 10 snaps. Zach Moss looked great. But we all know the Indianapolis Colts pay Jonathan Taylor $42 million. They pay Taylor $42 million. Do you think they do that so they use Zach Moss the rest of the season? No, not at all, ladies and gentlemen. I'm expecting it to be exactly what we were told last week. I should have listened better. I'm an idiot, so of course I did not. But I'm expecting it to be Jonathan Taylor slowly gets ramped up. If you look at our running back rankings this week, I do have JT and Zach Moss ranked close together. We have them at RB21 and RB23. I think it's probably going to be like a 60-40 split in favor of Jonathan Taylor this week. But then in the long term, I think Taylor takes more and more in this backfield. This was the #1 overall fantasy pick last year. This is an offense that is better than you were expecting, even with the injury to Anthony Richardson. Gardner Minshew has been an efficient quarterback, and they have been able to move the ball down the field. So yeah, I'm buying low on Jonathan Taylor. I think long-term, this is a running back that I have locked and loaded as a top 10 RB. Even at the short term, maybe a little bit bumpy with the Zach Moss usage. Now, speaking for long-term upside, Jackson Smith-Njigba is a wide receiver that I am interested in. And I am not telling you to go out there and pay an incredible amount for JSN. I'm not telling you to go through and trade away Mike Evans and Kyron Williams to get Jackson Smith-Njigba. Of course not, okay? But we've had a lot of people in live streams where, we're streaming every night, just make sure you're subscribed, asking us, Mason, is it time to drop Jackson Smith-Njigba? Mason, should I let go of JSN and should I go pick up Josh Reynolds off waiver? The thing is, if you drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba to drop him through the first 4 weeks, why did you draft him in the first place? Because what were you expecting? This is a rookie wide receiver that has gone out and he stepped into a wide receiver room with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, who are clearly cemented in this offense. You don't draft JSN for a short-term production. You don't draft him for what he's going to do for you in week 2. And ultimately, I would say I'm almost impressed with the target share that JSN has in this offense. Now, he has been laughably inefficient. I don't like the way that he's being used, but he's had 20 targets in comparison to DK Metcalf at 23. He's had 20 targets in comparison to Tyler Lockett at 27. Now, the other wide receivers are being used further downfield. The other wide receivers have been much more efficient as well. But JSN has been able to get on the field and get involved early on in his NFL career. Coming out of the bye week, this is typically when you get the rookie wide receiver bump. And when we're targeting a JSN trade, you do not go about it by saying, okay, hey man, I'm going to trade you Deebo Samuel for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Of course you're not. But instead, maybe if you want to go, okay, I'm going to give this guy Deebo Samuel for Amari Cooper, and I'm going to make a trade inside the same tier, and I'm going to ask him for JSN on top for free, right? I'm going to ask him, just throw JSN in. And then if we can roster that upside at the bottom end of our team, especially on a team where you are 5-0, 4-1, 3-2, where we're thinking a little more long-term, I think that would be an interesting spot. Obviously, if you're 1-4, if you're 0-5, and you're fighting for your life, you have no business going through and trading for someone that's a long-term asset. I'd say same thing with T. Higgins here, right? Because T. Higgins, maybe that interesting buy low guy if you're 4-1, if you're 5-0. And with Higgins, I don't know if he plays this next week. I don't care if he plays this next week. Even if he does, this is a wide receiver that we have ranked pretty damn low in our rankings. We have him wide receiver 31 against Seattle if he does play. because he's going to be stepping into a situation where obviously Jamar Chase is the alpha target. Not only is Jamar Chase the alpha target, but at the same time, Burrow's not 100% healthy. T. Higgins wouldn't be 100% healthy. So T. Higgins is not someone that you are trading for right now. T. Higgins is someone that instead you're going to go through and you are going to be trading for in the long term. I am very encouraged to see that Joe Burrow just looks a little bit better against the Arizona Cardinals than he did. But with Higgins, y'all know sometimes we go through and we say, okay, this player's a sell-high candidate, but not for this week. Or this player's a buy-low candidate and not for this week. I think Higgins kind of fits in that mold where going up against Seattle, he's probably going to disappoint. Then he has a bye week in week 7. And then you're going to be getting him back in week 8 going up against San Fran. So he may not even play this week considering the fact that they have the bye week next week. So similar to what we said with a couple of guys in our sell-high video last Thursday, this isn't someone that we're looking to make the trade with today. Instead, you probably want to put the reminder 2 weeks from now to go through and see if we can pick him up, even if we pay a low-end wide receiver 2, mid-wide receiver 2 price tag. I think it could be interesting going into week 8. Now, Jaylen Waddle will be a wide receiver you trade for today. I say it all the time with Waddle. This is a wide receiver that's going to win off of efficiency, not necessarily volume. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is going to get a tremendous amount of volume in this offense, but nonetheless, this is an elite level offense. Jaylen Waddle is a wide receiver that we've seen the massive spike weeks from before. We saw in year 1, Jaylen Waddle was a low-end wide receiver 1 in a bad offense. In year 2, Jaylen Waddle was a low-end wide receiver 1 in a good offense with an injured Tua, with Tyreek Hill taking target share. In year 3, do we expect Jaylen Waddle to now, in an elite offense, fall down to being a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3? I don't necessarily think so. I'm still standing by the Jaylen Waddle buy low bounce back. He did have 10 targets this past week. Yes, it only amounted to 35 receiving yards, but it is what it is. I mean, right now, he is the wide receiver 39 from a points per game perspective. I have him this week ranked more so as that mid to high end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 17-ish range. But I think that's all I have for y'all in this video. So, of course, if you have not done so already, go down there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And I am recording this on my birthday. And if you want to get me a birthday present, the best one you could do is going and signing up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK. Code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match. You're going to get our rest of season fantasy football rankings. And because it's our birthday, Underdog's hooking everybody up. It doesn't matter if you signed up with code FLOCK 2 years ago, last year, today, yesterday, tomorrow. If you signed up with code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a Justin Herbert special pick'em on Monday night, more than less than half a total yard. And also, ladies and gentlemen, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, you will get an additional Patrick Mahomes special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard in the Thursday games. But I think that's all I have for you. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.